One of the loudest games in Sanford Stadium of the last 25 years. That's what we're going to talk about in today's video. Should be a fun one. I've got a lot of games that we're going to talk about. I know a lot of you watching were at some of these games, so we're going to take a trip down memory lane. Last 25 years, loudest games. Let's get after it. So I went for the past 25 years because I definitely wanted to include this game in 2004. The Georgia Bulldogs absolutely throttled Nick Saban and the LSU Tigers. They were coming off a national championship. The Dogs beat number 13 LSU that day 45-16. David Green threw for 5 touchdowns. The place was insanely loud. I was there in the crowd. My ears were ringing for several days after that. I mean, the place was going nuts. Every big-time player that Georgia had made a big play in that game. Offensively, defensively, the place was absolutely rocking for the entire game. It was crazy. Just from beginning to end, that crowd was elite. It was 5-star, and it absolutely affected that LSU team, both, offense, defense, even special teams. Georgia crushed them. That was one of the loudest I've ever heard that stadium. So 2004, Georgia beat LSU, crushed LSU, really. That has to be on this list. 2005, the next year, to open it, Boise State came to town, and it was a bloodbath. It was a bloodbath. That place, I wouldn't say it was the craziest, loudest game that I've been around, but I think that year, it was loud. And Georgia just annihilate them. DJ Shockley, I think, had 5 touchdowns in that game. They beat Boise, who was number 18 at the time, 48-13. And I remember that the place was going pretty nuts. Pretty nuts. I wouldn't say it was as loud as the LSU game prior, but score after score after score. That game was over before the half, and the crowd had a lot to do with it. I think Jared Zabransky threw like 10 interceptions in that game. Each one, the place got louder and louder. Boise State had no shot. They were scared. They were scared. They came onto the field, saw that atmosphere and that crowd, and they were trembling from start to finish. So 2005, Georgia over Boise State, massive crowd, really loud. 2007, that was the blackout. This was an all-time Georgia home game as far as excitement, the electric atmosphere. It was insanely loud. I think Keelan Johnson started the game with an interception. But before that, when Georgia ran onto the field with black jerseys on, the place absolutely erupted. If you were at that game, you will never forget it. And I'm sure that's on your list too. 2007 Auburn game, the blackout, they won 45-20. It was a tight game for a little bit, but then Noshawn Marino, Thomas Brown, they ran wild on Auburn in that second half. But it's tough to find a better atmosphere and an electric crowd in the past 100 years than that game in 2007. Blackout against Auburn. 2009, South Carolina. Georgia beat them 41-37. This game had everything. And this is a game I feel like people forgot about. It was not a great season. Joe Cox at quarterback. But A.J. Green had a monster day. Brandon Boykin took off for a 100-yard kick return. Just absolutely ran over a South Carolina kid on special teams along the way. He had a big interception. The crowd went nuts when he made that big interception. Brandon Smith had a 50-yard touchdown on a sweep, kind of an end around that he took off down the field. Place went nuts. Georgia won in on a defensive stand at the end of the game. That game, again, had everything. Incredible game. The crowd was nuts. I was there in the stands for that one. It was really, really loud. 2012, Georgia beat Tennessee 51-44. That was a pretty electric crowd. Tennessee wasn't that great. And Todd Gurley, Keith Marshall ran through Tennessee, just like a knife through butter. That place was rocking. 51-44, a lot of points. The crowd was really into it with every big, long touchdown run. The crowd was erupting. Big win for the Dogs over Tennessee in 2012. 2013, there were 2 of them. They beat South Carolina early in that season, 41-30. That's when it looked like Georgia had a pretty good team before the injuries happened throughout the year. And then it became pretty tough. But Justin Scott Wesley running down the field late in that ball game to kind of put the exclamation mark on it after Georgia's tough loss, embarrassing loss against South Carolina the previous year. Aaron Murray, really big day. And when he hit Justin Scott Wesley for 70-something yards, place was going nuts. I mean, they were going nuts. South Carolina was a team Georgia really needed to beat. And that was a massive, massive win. The crowd was excellent that day. And then against Tennessee, LSU. every time LSU comes to Athens, it is a great crowd. 2013, that was the Aaron Murray versus Zach Mettenberger game. It was a shootout. Dogs won 44-41. The place was outstanding. That was a 5-star crowd. It was really, really loud the entire time. But when they made that defensive stop on 4th down, that sealed the game, sealed the victory, you could just hear it. Everyone was going nuts because Georgia won, which, I mean, I believe it was the game of college football. It was the game of the day that week in college football. Everyone was watching it. It was a fantastic game, a lot of big plays, but Georgia found a way to win it at the end. Aaron Murray, I think, threw for a bunch of touchdowns in that game as well, but the defensive stand they made at the end, crowd went nuts when they beat LSU in 2013. 2014, Georgia beat Tennessee 35-32. Todd Gurley ran for 200 yards. I was in the crowd for this one. And it was loud. It wasn't insanely loud, but it was loud. But the big pop came when Josh Dawson recovered a touchdown in the end zone that put Georgia up 10 with like 4.5 minutes to go. And that pretty much sealed it. Tennessee tried to come back. They scored a late touchdown to make things interesting again, but that place erupted when that defensive touchdown happened, because at that point you thought the game was over. And it technically wasn't over. Again, Tennessee tried to fight back, but the touchdown was the big play in that game. Late in the ball game, place went wild. So that was when Georgia beat Tennessee 35-32 in 2014. All right, more recently, 2017, Georgia crushed Mississippi State, ranked number 17 at the time, 31-3. Really, really loud environment, great environment. With that first play, I think everyone watching this remembers Jake Fromm, flea flicker to Terry Godwin to open up the game. Guess which dogs are barking first? Ugga, get after. One of the best lines you'll hear in a college football game. I think Joe Tessitore, that was a 5-star call. That place went crazy on that first play, that first big touchdown. Because Georgia fans knew that this could be a special team. Again, State was undefeated. They were playing well. Coming into Athens, I believe it was a night game, or maybe it was a 3:30 game. But again, it was one of the biggest games of that week. And Georgia got off to a big start. They crushed them. But that first touchdown, crowd went nuts. 2019, an all-timer. Again, Georgia beat Notre Dame. The crowd was too much. All right, the Notre Dame fans are going to hate this. They're not going to believe it. That crowd was way too much for the Notre Dame offense. They were going backwards, left and right, false start, false start, false start. They had at least 5, probably 6, maybe even more than that false starts in the game. The crowd was too much. The environment was too much. It was a 5-star elite atmosphere, probably as loud as a Notre Dame team has played on the road against. And it was too much. I mean, those are the facts. That crowd impacted that game in a massive, massive way. And Notre Dame, they fought hard, but that crowd made an impact. They were not good enough to come into Athens in that environment and win that game. Massive respect to the Georgia crowd. Everyone knew it was going to be bonkers. Everyone had circled that game for a long, long time, and the Georgia fans lived up to it. That was an elite crowd, an elite atmosphere, and a big reason why Georgia beat Notre Dame 23-17. In 2021, the Arkansas game, right? College game days there. Number 8 Arkansas, by the way. They're playing well. This is a noon game. College game day there. They kick it off, and just from the very beginning, that Georgia crowd was elite. 37-0, blowout, shutout win for the Dogs. They crushed them, and the fans, they were there. They really showed up for a noon game and was as loud as you could expect them. They were 5-star. Could not have expected more from that Sanford Stadium crowd. Whole country's watching, right? Game day, a top 10 matchup against number 8 Arkansas, and the Dogs just beat their brains in, 37-0. The crowd was massive. 2022, another one everyone remembers. This is going to trigger all the Tennessee fans. Georgia beat number 1 Tennessee 27-13. The crowd was too much. The crowd was way too much. That Tennessee offense couldn't do anything because they couldn't handle the noise. It was one of the loudest college football games of all time, according to a number of different people who were smarter than I am, who came out later that week and said from a decibel standpoint, it doesn't get much louder than that. So the crowd was too much for number 1 Tennessee. They were going backwards just as much as Notre Dame did a few years earlier. Just false start, false start, false start. The crowd was too much, right? That Neyland Stadium crowd, has never made an impact on a Georgia-Tennessee game like that Sanford Stadium crowd did in 2022. You're going to tell Georgia fans that Tennessee's number one, they're coming to Athens. Everyone knew the crowd was going to be going ballistic, and that's exactly what happened. That Sanford Stadium crowd was way too much for that number one Tennessee offense. You want to talk about a crowd making an impact? That's what happened, and Georgia needs to do that exact same thing with Texas, Alabama, and Ole Miss come to town in the fall. They need that type of environment. That was an elite five-star crowd, without a doubt, one of the loudest crowds and stadiums I've ever been in. Now, I've seen loud games at Clemson and LSU and at Auburn. I've seen a lot of crazy, wild crowds. That was as good as it gets when Georgia beat number one Tennessee 27-13 in 2022. And last year, I have to put that Georgia Tech game in there. 8 overtime win, 44-42. It was quiet for a while, but when Georgia started to come back, in the Dan Jackson forced fumble, place went bonkers, saved them. If that play doesn't happen, Georgia loses that game. Dan Jackson saved Georgia's behind, and that turnover got Georgia back in it, gave them life. And then with every overtime stop, every overtime score, the crowd was electric. That was a great atmosphere. Just college football at its best from a game perspective, from an environment, a crowd standpoint. Again, they were quiet early on because it looked like Georgia was going to lose that game. But when the Dogs made plays, the crowd stood up. Now, a lot of people left, and there's a reason why I could not put this on my list, because there were thousands of Georgia fans who left that game early. Shame on them. They shouldn't get any tickets for this upcoming season. If you left that Georgia Tech game early, you do not deserve to be back inside between the hedges during the 25 season. That's my take. I don't think it's a hot one at all. But for the people who stayed and watched Georgia beat Georgia Tech in 8 overtimes last fall, congratulations to you, because you made an impact. So just a few games that I think, as covering, this team and being in some of those environments, those are the loudest Sanford Stadium crowds and best environments of the last 25 years. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. What game were you at? Was there a game I'm missing? What game was loudest to you? Let me know in the comment section below. Hope you had some fun with it. Hope you learned something. Really appreciate it. And I'll see you over on the website, www.dawgpost.com. See you over there.